Michaela was driving her Volkswagen Golf down a highway in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Watch what happened when a pickup driver swerved without checking his blind spot to avoid a car that had stopped. The pickup cut off a minivan, and the driver had no chance to stop before hitting the back of the pickup. While the minivan rolled over, the pickup spun into Michaela's lane and she hit it head-on. Incredibly, there were no serious injuries. Unfortunately, all 3 vehicles involved were totaled. Simon was headed home from work when a Porsche came flying up behind his Audi Q3. The Porsche driver tried to blame the sun for blinding her, but that doesn't explain why she was driving so fast. Simon has moderate whiplash, and both vehicles were totaled. A few minutes after the crash, her mother and friends showed up with a tow truck and tried to quickly get Simon's info so they could leave. Simon knew something wasn't right, so he made them wait for the police, and they were not happy. When the cops arrived, they gave the driver of the Porsche a breathalyzer test. We don't know what the results were, but we do know that she was immediately arrested. Simon wanted to shout out everyone who stopped to help, especially an off-duty cop who kept him from having a panic attack. He also said he's thinking about replacing his Audi with a Tesla. Mario's wife was on her way to school and was waiting to turn right. The driver of the Nissan Rogue in front of her suddenly changed lanes without checking for other traffic. The driver of a Toyota Tacoma had to slam on their brakes and steer into the median to avoid rear-ending the Rogue Nissan. It looks like they set off in pursuit of the Nissan once they'd avoided an accident. This submitter was driving down a highway in Iowa when a truck driver failed to see a sedan before changing lanes, sending the sedan hurtling across the highway and directly in front of our submitter. Our submitter had no chance to stop in time, slamming into the side of the other car. The other car was totaled, and our submitter's Chevy Bolt EUV sustained $12,000 in damage. The semi-truck was just scratched, according to the submitter. Fortunately, there were no serious injuries. Hemming was driving in rush hour traffic and had been watching the driver of an Infiniti weaving through traffic and cutting people off, including him. Eventually, he cut off a Ford Explorer, and that turned out to be a big mistake.
Thank you, officer.
By the way, we had a lot of people commenting on the previous episode about being able to identify unmarked Ford Explorer cop cars by their missing roof rails. Well, this Explorer has roof rails, and it's definitely a cop car.
Thank you!
Lawrence witnessed a close call when a van nearly rear-ended a Mazda 3.
Oh no.
The van driver went up on the sidewalk to avoid an accident, and the driver of a pickup pulling a trailer made room as well. Lawrence thinks the van driver may have been distracted, which is funny because the back of the van says it's a phone-free vehicle. Daniel was driving his Mercedes E350 that he'd only owned for 5 months. On his way home from school, another driver pulled out in front of him, causing a collision. The other driver was unlicensed, uninsured, and not even wearing a seatbelt. As a result, he had mild injuries and was taken to a hospital to be checked out. Daniel's own insurance provider is paying for the damage, which will end up costing around $5,400 to fix. This submitter was headed to a nearby gas station when he turned onto a main road. He'd tried to make sure traffic was clear, but he hadn't seen 2 motorcycles hidden by the glare of the setting sun. When the speeding bikers caught up to him and were forced to slow down, one of them flipped him off while our submitter tried to make apologetic hand gestures. Based on what happened next, it seems the biker didn't understand. After speeding past our submitter, the biker flipped him off some more before pulling up alongside him. Our submitter rolled down his window and tried to apologize. We had to mute the audio due to copyrighted music being played, but I can confirm that the submitter was apologetic. Unfortunately, the biker was having none of it. When he tried to slap our submitter's side window, he swerved to avoid the attack. This only served to enrage the biker further, who voiced his strong discontent with some more threatening words before throttling away. This submitter had noticed a white Infiniti SUV swerving around traffic behind them. When the car in front of them abruptly stopped, the Infiniti nearly rear-ended a Kia that was right behind our submitter. Our submitter said he's sure there would have been a collision if not for the fact that the Kia driver was paying attention and dove to the left to give the Infiniti driver room to swerve around them. Ondach watched a Porsche driver fail a drift attempt and hit a parked car. Ouch! Maybe if you're gonna spend $150,000 on a luxury electric car, you should take a beginner's driving course before getting behind the wheel. Lucas was on his way home one rainy night after picking up his roommate from work. When the car in front of him stopped suddenly, he had to slam on his brakes to avoid rear-ending it. Unfortunately, the car behind them wasn't able to avoid a collision, rear-ending Lucas's car. Luckily, there were no injuries, and the damage to his car was minimal. Royce sent us this clip from when he was driving down a very narrow street in New Zealand. A truck driver in the oncoming lane thought he could squeeze past a Mercedes, but he thought wrong. The truck clipped the side of the Mercedes. The submitter didn't tell us what happened after that, but I'm guessing it wasn't a fun day for the truck driver. Jacob was using an express lane on a Florida highway when another car passed him at high speed. As it did, one of its tires exploded, sending it into the median barrier before bouncing back across every lane of the highway. Jacob wasn't in a position to stop due to the high volume of traffic. He's just glad he wasn't involved in the incident. Akash and a friend were looking for a parking spot to attend day 2 of WasabiCon. Unfortunately, the driver behind them wasn't paying attention and rear-ended them when they stopped for traffic. Eyes on the road, people! This isn't even the first time Akash has been rear-ended. He made an insurance claim and included his dashcam footage. Repairs will cost over $600 US. Marianne captured a perfect example of why you shouldn't try to race a yellow light. A car came flying through the intersection from the left, smashing into another driver who was making an unprotected left turn. The car then rolled down an embankment and hit a pole. Marianne sent her dashcam footage to the police, but she doesn't know what happened or who was determined to be at fault. This submitter was headed home from work about an hour after it had rained. Suddenly, the vehicle in front of him lost control and started spinning. Our submitter suspects that this vehicle had low tire tread and wanted to remind our viewers to check your tires and don't delay changing them if they need it. Kamal was headed home to get some dinner after work when he watched a black Hyundai being driven by a teenage girl smash into a white Mercedes being driven by an elderly woman. At first, Kamal wasn't going to stop, but when he heard the teenage girl accusing the elderly woman of pulling out in front of her through his open window, he knew he had to stick around and set the record straight. He waited for police to arrive and showed them his dashcam footage on his iPad, for which they, and the Mercedes driver, I'm sure, were very grateful. Abby was headed to school when an SUV driver ahead of her started changing lanes. Evidently they changed their mind, but by then, a speeding pickup driver had flown up next to them and they ended up making contact. The pickup driver pulled over after the mild sideswiping incident. At first, it looked like the SUV driver would make a run for it, but they eventually pulled over as well. Who do you think was at fault here? Let us know in a comment. Abby wanted to shout out her friend Caitlin for convincing her to send in her video. Thanks, Caitlin. Kristen was headed to work early one morning when a pickup truck merged in front of her. A little while later, it suddenly swerved into a Ford Escape in the other lane. Kristen said both drivers pulled over immediately and it looked to her like everyone was okay. This submitter sent us a great description of his clip, so I'm just gonna read what they wrote verbatim. A pretty peculiar pesky passenger perched at the peak of this 4Runner, panicking and praying to not be pushed apart. I'm guessing this guy was just dying for a ride someplace. How long do you think he's been hanging on? Okay, I'll stop. Do you have a dashcam video that you want to share with us? Please send the video together with a description of what happened using the link in the description below. Looks like someone thinks Toyotas are to die for.